Hello, Jacqueline.
Hello, Namal.
Great to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for doing this. You are my first guest on my series of political discussions with different political parties. And it's not a political discussion. It's more of any migrant trying to understand the political landscape in Australia. And because we are in Perth, especially in WA.
Yep.
So that's what I'm trying to do here. And through me, I think many migrants and even Australians will get to know the political parties much closer. So thank you for doing that. So should we dive straight into it?
Yes, why not?
So I won't do your bio. I'll let you to define yourself, who you are, what's Liberal Democrats and how you are connected, and take away.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm Jacque Holroyd. I'm currently the president of the Western Australian Executive, and I've been a part of the party for about a year now, and I've been very interested in politics for a long time. Myself, I'm a business owner. I own two businesses with my partner. We have been frustrated by the politics that is played in business, and it is quite frustrating to think that people work so hard to try and get ahead. They try and develop their businesses, and there's just so much regulation. There's so much in the way of taxes and things that make it very difficult for business owners. So that really gets my interest in politics in the first place. I have flirted with the Liberal Party in the past and been a member, and was quite disappointed with going to their party meetings. They weren't really interested in their members' views. They had their own agendas that were happening, and that was quite frustrating as a business owner, wanting to be heard, wanting to be a member. So I really, just disconnected from that. Then just followed everything that was happening in politics federally as well as in the states. So each state is very different. So I've lived in a number of different states myself. I'm actually originally from Victoria, so I've got friends and family over there that have suffered through the just what was going on over there. It's just it's still quite awful hearing about the stories of things that have happened over there. And we've also suffered through a lot of the lockdowns and different things that have happened in WA. We have been seemingly more free. But at the same time, if you wanted to travel out of state, it was very difficult as a business owner. If you left the state, you may not have been allowed to come back. We had numerous people that we knew that left because of family reasons, or they had people that were dying. They had people that needed to see them because of business reasons, and they got stuck elsewhere because they just weren't permitted to come back again. Some people had to resign jobs. So things like that have really probably motivated me to actually join a party that I believe is very motivated to help people, to have, and the Liberal Democrats themselves have they're all under everything underlying the Liberal Democrats is libertarian. Being a libertarian, to free up everything so that people are free to make the choices how they want to live and how they want to work. So at the moment there's massive governments everywhere. There are so many bureaucrats attached to governments, and that's where all our taxpayers' money is going. And you look at the deficits and what they're actually spending money on. And there's so much waste. And so the Liberal Democrats actually believe in smaller government. We believe that people should pay less tax, that they should decide how they want their money spent. They shouldn't have the government telling them, we will give you this money back after you've paid your tax. And then you can spend it on solar, or you can spend it on electric cars, or you can spend it on whatever it happens to be. So the underlying premise of Liberal Democrats is less government intervention and more freedom for you to choose how you want to live.
Right. Thank you for that introduction. Let's start with your party's name. What does it mean to be a liberal, and what does it mean to be a Democrat? And why Liberal Democrat?
Okay, that is an interesting one at the moment because we're in the process of changing it. So this year there was actually the Liberal Party and the Liberal Democrats went head-to-head in court. And there was a case to say that the Liberals did not want the Liberal Democrats to be able to use the word Liberal in their name. And so it ended up going to court, and they just decided, well, that every political party that began with a name, they own that name. So this is actually sort of going to throw a lot of different political parties on their heads, I guess, and they will have to come up with new names. So we're actually in the process at the moment. We're rebranding. So if you have a look at some of our old information that we've got, it'll be all the red, white and blue. And it's very patriotic and, now we're changing to, it's been a little bit of a soft, let's change the colours. Let's see how that's received by the constituents out in the wider world. And so it's more grey and a yellow, a gold colour. So if you have a look at our website and the different ones around, you'll actually see that colouring. So the name itself is going through, they're testing different names. So currently we are the Liberal Democrats. That will change probably in the next year or so. We'll have a definite, hopefully in the next few months, we'll be able to have a total rebrand, and we'll be able to take it from there and move on. So there are different names such as Liberty, different versions of Liberty, because we're libertarians, it makes sense. So...
Right. So does that mean that the name Liberals and Democrats are not coming out of the core values of the party, and they are just there because we needed some name, and the new names will not be reflecting of those liberal and democratic values of the party?
So they do, the underlying values of those are why we chose that name. So John Humphreys, who is the founder of the Liberal Democrats, there's been different iterations over the years of the name, and it is the values of the Liberals, and we believe we're the true Liberals with a little L, and we actually do believe that the values of the Liberal name itself is it's self-explanatory really, but it's just more freedom around, choosing. And that's particularly, it used to be very targeted to business owners, to people that were, entrepreneurs. They were trying to get ahead. So, and the same with the Democrats. So I think that's why we have been forced, because of the High Court case, that we do have to change that name. And but it doesn't change our values. Our values have always been the same. We've always believed in the same things. It's just, a name that we have to change now.
So as a person who is new to Australia, help me understand the meaning of liberal, because liberal has got different meaning in different contexts.
That's true.
Liberal has got a different meaning in United States.
Yep.
In academia, liberal has got different meaning.
Yep.
And in politics, in Australian politics, it's got a different meaning.
Yeah.
So what does liberal means to you, and
Yep.
what should it mean in Australian politics?
So I suppose if you look up the word liberal, not in the political sense, but just the word liberal itself, you can actually see that it means, a less interaction, less intervention in something. So your views are more, they're wider. You can actually encompass a lot of different things under that liberal banner. It doesn't have to be so, strict around certain things. So does that explain it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
That's okay. And
Yep.
how, the next question coming from that is, how is your party putting those liberal values in your policies. So maybe start with some policies, that bigger policies.
Yep.
What should I look for when I try to join your party?
Yep. So for the recent federal election that we had in May, I've actually got a Freedom Manifesto here, which it actually it shows 10 different policies that we went to the election with. And I can read through the different ones. So the first one at that time was COVID alarmism. And one of the things that we, as I've explained, we are very libertarian based. We believe that you should decide how you want to live your life. So the whole COVID alarm, being locked down, being forced to take vaccines, whether you wanted to or not, to be able to work in certain places or not, because of directions from the government, that is totally not acceptable, according to us, and it still remains unacceptable for anything like that. We also had recall elections, which recall elections actually gives the power back to the people. So if you elect a government after they have been in power for a little while and they say have a plan, but they don't actually have a plan, and they then the people can say, well, you were promising this, you were promising that, you're not actually living up to what those promises were, and which is the reason why you're elected in the first place. So we would like to, through going through a process, to actually have a recall election to say, this is not acceptable for you to actually go and lie to people just to get in power and then go and do something else. So we think that's a really important one, and it would be very helpful right now, I believe. The next one is debt and deficit. So we have a lot of really smart economists in our party, and debt and deficit is a huge one. So as I said before, governments, whether it's state government or federal, they are all large, really large at the moment. They have a lot of bureaucrats that are also hanging on them, and that all costs a lot of money. So that is actually driving up our debt, and to pay for all of those people and to make the choices that everyone is making. So at the moment, we've got very, very high inflation. They're actually exacerbating that inflation by a lot of the things that they've done. So we haven't got enough people. It's actually pushing up wages for people that are here in jobs, because there's not a lot of choice around who you're actually employing at the moment, because it's really hard in a lot of industries, and we're seeing that myself in my business, and we work in a lot of different areas, and it's very, very difficult for anyone to find really good people at the moment. So, well, not really good people, just any people. Bums on seats is really, really rare at the moment. But getting back to that debt and deficit, it is just important that the right decisions are made to make it a much better country, that we don't have to get handouts, which is your money. It's your taxpayers' money that you have paid, you've worked hard for, and they decide to give it back to you and say, look, we're giving you free money. And that's really, it's not acceptable. So another one is low taxes. So we went to the federal election and we wanted to cap it at a tax-free threshold of $40,000 and a flat rate of 20% income for individuals and for businesses above 40,000. So you only pay after that 40,000 limit, and then you only ever pay 20%. And there's been a lot of they've actually run the different scenarios with that, and it works. As long as you get rid of a lot of those bureaucrats, and you get, which I went to the election with, and a lot of people were like, well, I'm actually one of those bureaucrats. So it's quite confronting to people to think they're going to be out of a job because we want to actually make government smaller and to make it more efficient. And I think there's, with with our systems and processes that are available nowadays, we shouldn't have so many people at the moment having to be paid. So getting those taxes down would be fantastic there. We've also believed that superannuation should be voluntary. So a lot of people are going into retirement and they still have a mortgage. So their superannuation is simply paying for their mortgage when they retire. If they had have used that money just during their lifetime, they probably would have paid off their house much sooner, and then they would have been in a position to actually, decide how they wanted to save for their retirement or what they want to do. They might have purchased another house, they might have done something different. But at the moment, people don't have a choice, and it's actually a really big impost on businesses as well. So it's just recently gone up. It's continuing to increase. So it's actually the people are employed and they're given a wage, and as a part of that wage, the employer has to pay superannuation depending on what their wage is. So it's kind of a hidden cost that people feel like, they're getting something for nothing. But when you're a business owner, you're actually really feeling the cost of having a new employee. So each employee that you have, you've got an additional 11% on top of, or 10%. It's going up to 12%. So you've got that in addition. When every time you put someone on, you have all these on costs. So making superannuation voluntary and that would actually give the power back to the person. They can decide whether they want to keep their money or they would like to save it. So it just gives more choice, which is what we're all about. Small business too it's just been forgotten pretty much. So having a lot of the regulations and different things that have to be complied with is such an impost on smaller businesses. So when you look at the large corporates, they can afford to have someone devoted to looking at different things that are needed running a business. But the realities are, if you're a family business or you're just a small business owner, you as the owner are probably doing the books. You're probably going out getting the customers. You're probably also doing all the work. So the small businesses, they just have to work more and more to try and comply with all of the different regulations and things that are in place. So taking away a lot of that regulation and how to do things. So I think an example of that could be people that run a bar. That the people that are actually serving drinks need to actually have a qualification, and it just seems ridiculous you have to go to bar school and you learn how to do drinks and be a responsible person, whereas it used to be you would actually start working in an organisation like that. The manager or the owner would actually teach you, this is what you look out for, this is what you do, this is how you do everything. And it's up to the owners to, if they want to have a better place, then they actually put more training into their people. At the moment, you can't hire bar staff without having the tick from the government, and it just feels like it's just a lot of regulation for no benefit for the business owners, and it's not really any benefit. Like, you as a consumer actually pay for that when you're buying your drinks or whatever you happen to be purchasing. Cheap and reliable energy is a really, really big one at the moment. And as you see, we're going more and more towards all of the so-called green technologies. A lot of them are subsidised by the government, and if you took away those subsidies, they would actually show how ineffective they are at actually bringing down the costs of energy for actually producing energy. So we're still very reliant on coal-fired powered stations, and you've actually seen in places like Victoria where they've actually, or South Australia, where they've blown up their different older places instead of maintaining them or coming up with better technology. to actually have, cleaner coal, they have decided to just get rid of it and just swap over. So you can actually see the blackouts each summer, and people are encouraged to actually go through winter and put a blanket on instead of turn your power on. Don't have a fire or don't turn your heater on. And it's just ridiculous in a place like Australia where it gets so cold and so hot. So exploring things like we are actually selling all the products to make nuclear power stations to other countries, but we are not allowed to actually do that ourselves. There's a ban. We believe that they should get rid of that, and it should be open to any type of technology that, develop it. And if it's worth, without subsidising it, if it's worth using, it will actually prove itself. And by allowing an open market, for getting energy prices down, you would actually have a much more efficient system. So we're certainly about opening that up at the moment. And you can actually see in Europe at the moment that they've realised that it's really too expensive for people, trying to use windmills and solar and everything else. So they're actually going back to let's go to nuclear. A lot of the places that had closed down their nuclear plants are actually opening them again. And I think that the important thing about nuclear, that people like to say, things about Chernobyl and different places where there's been accidents. There's actually been a move on a lot of the technology from the time of those type of when they were created, and now it's much cleaner. There's a lot known about nuclear now, and the accidents and the deaths and things, there's actually far less than what you would actually believe. There was no one that died in Fukushima, so the only people that died were the ones that crashed in cars trying to drive away. So interesting fact. Decentralised education is another big one for us. We believe that, just like everything else, you should be able to choose how you want your children to be educated. There should be choice around what schools offer, and by actually, rather than at the moment, schools tend to have, if you live in an area, you are then required to go to schools within that area. There are exceptions if you do particular sports, or if you do particular, you do a language, or you do something in particular, you may be eligible to go to a different school out of the district. But overall, you are sort of, unless you go to private school, and then you get more choice. So, but then you have to pay for your education. So we believe that if you just take away all of the restrictions around, areas of schools and things, that it would actually allow the schools themselves to decide what sort of education they want to offer. And the people, the parents, would actually be able to decide whether they wanted to go to that school or not. And schools would then have to get their act together. They would have to specialise, or they would have to just decide, well, this is what parents are asking for, so let's give it to them. Rather than at the moment, it's very directed by the government or the loudest voices at the moment. So you actually go into a lot of schools, and our level of literacy and numeracy has dropped over many years now, and it just seems such a shame in such an affluent country to actually have dropping education levels from our students. So, and I think that is actually the pressure that the government has put on, or the education department has put on schools to supply such a wide range of different things, rather than actually concentrating on, making sure that people can read and write adequately before they actually, give them all this other stuff. So I think that's really important. And free speech is a huge one for us, and that over the last couple of years has been a really interesting one, especially on social media. very topical at the moment with Twitter, and apparently a few people on the left have been banned, or their posts have had warnings, and they've just not really been received well when this has happened, although it's been happening for people that are more conservative for many years now. And I know myself that on Facebook, when I was running for the federal election, a lot of my posts would just get banned, and I was actually shadow banned. So I was actually sending messages to people or putting tags on people, and they weren't even seeing my messages. So there is such, depending on what you're saying and whether it's received well or not by certain people that are in these organisations, you may or may not be heard. And I think that is wrong. You know, everyone should have the ability to speak out, and like yourself, you know, giving me the opportunity to speak here, I think it's just fantastic. And I think everyone should have the opportunity to speak to people, whether you agree with them or not, it doesn't matter, but to be able to hear what is actually being spoken is really, really important, and to be able to debate. I think in our society at the moment, the ability to talk about something and discuss something between people that do not agree, it's almost banned. And I think that is detrimental to our society. And, you know, especially at a time where people want acceptance. They want you to be, you know, accept lots of different types of people and lots of, you know, different ways of life and things like that. But at the same time, they're not allowing certain things to be discussed. So I find that very frustrating myself, and have seen it, you know, in mainstream media as well. It is sometimes difficult for us, the smaller parties, to actually get our messages out into the world. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak here. And freedom from surveillance is another big one. So if you actually drive around, and we've been doing a bit of work with various people at the moment, and some of them are former police employees, and they have actually said you drive around and just have a look at the cameras, and there are cameras everywhere, and they might be on the roads, they might be around the stores, you know, different houses have got them. You'll find them on street corners, you find them everywhere. And when you start looking at them, you go, okay, I wonder who owns that. I wonder who owns this one. Who is actually seeing the information that is getting captured here, and what are they doing with it? And so I think freedom from surveillance is a huge one. And, you know, you being on Facebook, or it's, you know, topical with the Optus and Medibank, the you know, cyber attacks there. So the reason why they get this information is because it's stored. And why does a phone company need to know your license number? Why do they need to know certain things, and why do they need to keep that information for the long term? You know, maybe they're trying to restrict something, but they're actually creating a bigger problem. And you actually look at the people at the moment who have their medical information out there, and they've got their personal bank details, their license numbers, their passports. That information should not be in the hands of anyone but the people that own it. So, yeah.
Right. Thank you. There's 10 points, but there's a lot of
I know
thing behind those 10 points
Yep.
for any person to grasp. And obviously, I'll have many questions.
Yep.
So, and let's start. Where do you want to start? We can start with the first point, going towards from COVID alarmism to
if you'd like to, can I just also raise, we just last night had an event where we've just highlighted the WA firearms policy that we've also released. So we have 14 points there that we have released. So if you go onto our website, the WA Liberal Democrats website, you'll actually be able to have a look at that policy. We've made it very straightforward, and it was received really well last night at the function. So we did have shooters, people that are just general, public who own firearms themselves. And there were other people that were from associations as well. And we were lucky enough to have Murray Bowe, who was the WA Shooters Association president. He was actually speaking. So great conversation, was had there. So, but we can take it as you want to with your questions.
I have a very good idea, and it comes from Indian politics. What happens is that whenever a new government is formed in any of the state or the union government, what they do is come out with a plan for the next 100 days. This is what we are going to do in the next 100 days, which is about 3.5 months. Mm-hmm. So we'll do the same with you. Let's say we'll make you the premier of WA. Mm-hmm. Let's start with WA and then we'll go for the national politics. Choose whatever policies you want to take out of those 10 or 14 policies. Give me a plan for the next 100 days that you're going to implement, and then I'll ask questions on that. So that brings us down from 14 to maybe 5 policies, which you think will impact whole of WA and how you're going to change things and how it will make the life better for everyone, for me. So I can see that there's much more liberty and much more freedom for me under a Liberal Democrat government than any other party. Okay, so you're the premier now.
Okay. It's actually an interesting question to pose, and I think there are just so many important things. So
choose whatever first point thing you will try to do.
So I'm just thinking about, at the moment, we have the McGowan government has just implemented. So they've taken away our emergency powers that have been in place for over 400 days. And in place of that, they've actually developed legislation, because they've got such a majority. They've got this legislation that they have put in place for the next 2 years. And it is under the guise of COVID. So I think a lot of people would agree that COVID is much better understood now than it was in 2019. And I think the fear, the hysteria that was actually around that has abated a lot, because we do understand it better. There are certainly segments of the population that need to be protected, but at the same time, I think people can choose whether they want to wear masks, whether they want to have vaccines and things like that. So my first step would probably be to actually reverse that legislation.
So what does that legislation do?
So it has actually, so the government, the McGowan government had, with the emergency powers, had the ability to, direct people to have the mandates, to direct people to wear masks and different things. So it wasn't permanent legislation. It was just something that was in place for a period of time because of an emergency, which is why it's emergency powers. But they have, and so it was always the government that decided on whether they shut the borders, whether, what things that they did. And they've actually taken that and given the powers, except for closing the border, to the police commissioner instead. The police commissioner, my understanding is, does not have to report or ask for permission when he wants to use these powers. He is able to go into people's homes. He's able, just because he wants to. He can direct people. They don't necessarily have to be police officers either, going into people's homes. They can, stop you in your car. They can take your car away. They can, strip search you. They can give you injections against your will. That they are the powers that they've actually just given to the police commissioner, who can then decide if he wants to use those or not. And I think that is just abhorrent in a democracy.
So, but in the last 2 years, we had the same thing. The Premier will empower the police commissioner as the state emergency coordinator to do all these things.
But it was still the Parliament deciding what would actually be given permission to do. Right. So at the moment, with this legislation that's gone through, the police commissioner does not have to refer to anyone.
Right. So in your government,
Yep.
there will be no such powers. The
No.
police commissioner will not be
No.
empowered to do this. So who will have the powers?
No one should have that power. No one should have the power to force you to take vaccinations. They should not have the power to prevent you from going to work or to do any of those things. Why would you give permission for anyone to do that in a democracy?
But that democracy is in fighting or in attrition with that pandemic where lots and lots and heaps of people have died across the world, and even though those powers have been seemed or deemed as tyrannical, they have saved lives in WA.
Have they saved lives?
I'm asking you. I'm just giving
Yep.
the stats, and
Yep.
we saw a lot of deaths in US. We saw a lot of deaths in UK. Italy was specifically affected
Yep.
by all these deaths. India had all these deaths, and we saw all these pictures on TV and things. So
Yep.
if
There
those-
was also, so I think the interesting thing about it, and I'm not an expert on the pandemic at all, but my understanding is the previous couple of years before the coronavirus came, or was a thing, the flu, which was going through every year, the annual flu, was very mild. And so by the time the coronavirus then started going through the population, world population, the fact that a lot of people who would normally die of the flu, they haven't died. And so they did die when they got coronavirus because they are vulnerable. They have, immune suppressed issues. They are elderly. The majority of people that died, I believe it was 80, I think it was 86 was the average age of death. And that's actually higher than the, your expected death rate. So you actually look at the facts of everything. You don't just look at the coronavirus has done this. And I think a lot of the data that has also been attributed to corona deaths, they are actually people that have died. They would have died of something because they were elderly. They did have health issues. It wasn't just because of coronavirus. It was for other reasons as well. And so, and like I said a little bit earlier, it's much better understood. They did rush out the vaccine. They didn't test the vaccine a lot. And now we're actually having a lot of discussion about, was the vaccine effective? It wasn't effective in stopping transmission. Was it actually effective in saving lives? I don't know. I actually look at the stats now, and the people that have had 3 or 4 injections are actually getting sick now. And they're not getting sick from coronavirus. They're getting sick because of other things, because their immune system is now, I don't know whether it's permanently damaged, but it is certainly lowered because of the vaccines. And the more vaccines that people have, the more sick they seem to be. So I suppose my position as a Liberal Democrat running the state would be to give people the choice if they want to have a vaccine or not, if they want to isolate or not. Just like before COVID, we would decide whether we went to work if we were sick. You would actually use your common sense and you would say, I'm going to stay home because I don't want the whole office getting sick. I'm not going to go to work today because, I'm not feeling that well, so let's have a sick day. That's what they're there for. So I don't believe that any government should tell people when they should work, when they should be injected. And I do believe that, people have got enough common sense to make their own choices around this.
Right. But at the same time, there has to be some authority who has the responsibility and the power to keep people safe in a state. That's the role of a government, to keep the people safe. So if it is not the premier, the changes what have been made, what I think is that the premier has given the powers to the police commissioner. You say the police commissioner shouldn't have that power. Somebody has to have that powers.
Why?
Because you have to run the state, you have to manage the health infrastructure, you have to manage the well-being of the vulnerable, be it the people in the aged care or people in hospitals or the children or anyone. Who's responsible in your government of those people's health and well-being?
So if you take away coronavirus, or actually add back coronavirus again, so the government, if they're responsible for keeping people safe, why did they give themselves immunity from any, and they gave the drug companies immunity from any fallback if it from giving these injections, from any of the steps that they've taken? They've actually given themselves immunity from that. If they are responsible for looking after the people, they should take that responsibility and the consequences of that. They haven't done that. They have just left them out to dry, really, because they've put in place these things, but then they've protected themselves and they've protected the drug companies, so they are immune from any backlash from this. I believe that there is joint responsibility with the federal government as well with health. I know that they give the money and then the states do spend the money. I do believe that, if they have, instead of spending a lot of money on a lot of the hysteria that actually happened with the coronavirus, if they had have shored up their medical centres and their hospitals, in each of the states, I believe they all went backwards. They were not looking, like you look at the ambulance, the problems with the ambulance ramping, you look at the problems with just finding beds. If they spent all of the money that they did on giving injections and, forcing people to have those injections, spend that money on providing good medical care, a lot of people didn't go to hospital anyway. Most people didn't, and whether that's attributed to vaccines or not, I would question that. But I believe that giving it to children, they know that kids don't actually get sick from it. They may pass it on, but then giving them a vaccine is not going to stop them passing it on anyway. So I believe that we should have good hospital, we should have good ambulance, and we should spend really good money on getting the best care that we can with our doctors, with our nurses. I mean, there was a whole lot of people that were actually put out of work in the medical fraternity, and they still can't get enough people now, which is why we haven't got enough beds, because they just said, well, you can't work if you're not vaccinated. And again, a lot of them wear all the PPE. They protect themselves. When you had flus, when you've had other things in the past, there hasn't been this hysteria. So I do believe that the state should have the responsibility to have a good system in place to look after people. I don't believe that they should have to force people to do things.
Right, but those two things, what I think, are intertwined. Mm-hmm. So once I have the responsibility of keeping you safe, I get the powers to tell you what to do. But it's the same as kids. Yeah. If I have the responsibility to raise my kids and to provide them for food and education and everything, I get to tell them what to do and not to do. So if you take away the powers of the government to not tell the people what to do and what not to do, as you tell in the emergency powers, mm-hmm. then it takes away the power of the government to even provide for those healthcare facilities, because the government doesn't have a responsibility.
But they don't have the responsibility at the moment.
Or in other words, it's that putting the responsibility of the health infrastructure and healthcare to the government, but no powers to get to that result.
So we never had anything like this in the past. We have had various different things, that have come into Australia over the years, and there has not been this hysteria. And I actually wonder whether it is social media. It is, people have got access to a wider audience now. They also can hear from a wider audience of opinions. They can see what's happening in other countries. And I think, for something that actually originated in China, and we followed what China did, and then you can actually see that China's response to it was ineffective as well. But we still persist with trying to copy that. So I think that as adults, I don't believe that the government should tell you, they should be not prescriptive in telling you what to do in your life. I believe that there should be laws to keep people safe. And I know that you're going to say, well, that's keeping them safe from, coronavirus or whatever, and people are so stupid that they can't look after themselves from coronavirus. If you gave people the choice, do you think that they would actually go to work if they were sick? And that is where you have to strip back this authoritarian. We are living in a democracy, and we are actually getting our freedoms stripped away by all of these different rules and regulations, by not being allowed to be, free thinking people that are going to make sensible decisions. The majority of people are not going to go out and become axe murderers because you take away one law. They're not going to, go and infect, every single person that they meet because, they're not going to do it on purpose. Most people are sensible, and I think people should be given the ability to make decisions for themselves. The government is not, unless you want to live, you can go and live in a socialist or a communist place if you want to be told what to do. I don't believe Australia is that place.
Right. So getting that policy done is a matter of like maybe a week. You go to the parliament, you get the laws scrapped. What's next?
Okay. I would have to go to small business. Me as a small business owner myself, I actually look at a lot of the regulations. I would actually, and I know 100 days that would be probably the full-time job to just this area. But just looking at what legislation, what rules are in place, what things do people have to do to run a business, and strip it back. Take away things that are just nonsensical. Like I said before about having a requirement for certain, qualifications for certain things. Take it back to, and this could also be intertwined with education. So through the years, there used to be, when I grew up, there was technical schools. So people that had more technical bent, they wanted to do something that was more hands-on, or, that they would have these schools which were specifically designed for them. They would, certain, and it was high schools, and then they would go on and become, mechanics or engineers or whatever they happen to be. And then you also had just straight high schools, which they dedicate themselves to the more academic. So there was actually a period of time in when I went to school, which was a long time ago now, but you would get to about year 9, year 10, and people would actually start deciding. They had this, wide sweep of, different things that they learnt about. They would then just start narrowing their focus of what do I want to do. A lot of them would then just decide, well, I want to be an academic. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a doctor, whatever I want to be. And there were other people that said, I would like to be a mechanic or and a carpenter, something like that. And so some people would actually go and do an apprenticeship and do that. Other people would then go on to finish high school, and they would then go to university and learn that profession. What happens at the moment is that most most children are required to go to year 12 regardless of whether they are suitably, they want to or not, really. And again, this is the government telling people you need to have this. Not a lot of, I shouldn't say not a lot. So there are some children who are just not academic. There are some children that, they don't have, a creative, they're not creative. They are not able to use their hands. They're not, and so why would you wouldn't force them to be a carpenter or something if they really didn't have the want or the ability to do that. But we're actually forcing children, regardless of whether they want to or whether they're capable of, finishing their year 12 education. There should be, again, like I said, choice to do that. And I think with your small business, you would actually have the ability, if you went back to a more apprenticeship sort of based, qualifications and things, it would allow a lot of small businesses to have those people in their businesses. It used to be that people would try out different professions, and then they would go on and learn more about the ones that they actually like to. And nowadays there's certainly that option to do that, but you actually find people nowadays in their late 20s still getting an education, and the government again is allowing that to happen, that people can just get degree after degree. And again, I suppose that's that choice, but they should be paying for the privilege of doing that, rather than the taxpayer having to pay for people's choices of I want to be an academic for the rest of my life.
So how does that affect the small businesses that we started from, that you're going to help the small businesses?
So getting rid of a lot of that regulation, you would actually enable, so if people were able to, in certain professions at the moment, it's very difficult to get just workers. One of the businesses that I myself work in, they have actually said they cannot get people to come into their business and do just the dirty work. So this particular business was a plastics. They go and collect plastics and they recycle them. And they said they need to go to the different businesses and different places to get that plastic, and no one wants to do it. So you've got the owners instead doing that, and then they're trying to run the business as well. And so they were actually giving people food at lunchtime just to entice them, come and do this. But even that, so if you have people, so going back to small business and education, you were allowing people to leave school at a younger age if they don't want to be an academic, or if they don't, if they get to a certain point that they just go, this is it for me. I want to go out into the real world. I want to do other things. You would actually have a lot of those small businesses would be able to have those people in their businesses. They would be able to utilise them. They would be able to teach them and train them. You could then, have different things within the education system to actually support them in. So at the moment, you have a lot of different programs that are accessible. Sometimes at different periods of time, they seem to be more accessible to train younger people. So I used to own a pizza shop, and we used to have we had some many young people working with us, and we had some really smart people there, and so we actually made them managers, and they did training management courses, and we did that as a part of our business. We're trying to help them. They were helping us by getting better qualified. They were doing it on the job, and I think there needs to be more of that in available to people, to actually fill those gaps of so everyone that's getting these educations where they've got year 12, they don't want to go and collect the rubbish, or and there are of course exceptions to that, but people think they are entitled. A lot of university graduates as well, they don't have a lot of life experience, but they believe that they should be the manager before they've even started working in their life. So, and I think there needs to be a bit of a recalibration between real life experience and education. And I think that the two should not be exclusive of each other. They should be, and you actually find people that have had to educate themselves while they're working are actually really valuable employees, because they appreciate how hard education can be to actually get to attain their degree, or their to finish off their year 12 because they didn't have the opportunity as a younger person, or they decided to do that. And because they can actually work and study, and I look at some of the people in our executive at the moment, they're in their 20s, and they're educating themselves, they're working, and they're also, in the Liberal Democrats, and they're on our executive. They're hard-working people, they're smart. And I think, we need more of that. We need to develop that entrepreneurial spirit in Australia, not squash it, because with taxes, and the harder you work, the more impost we're going to put on you to make it harder to run your business. So as the government, I would actually take away a lot of those limiting factors. So payroll tax would be probably my first one. I just think that is just, I'm sure the government will scream if they hear this.
What is a payroll tax?
So payroll tax, if you have a certain amount of people working in your business, you have to pay a percentage of what you pay them to the government.
And what is that for?
Just because they want money.
Right.
So there's no real purpose to it. So the larger you get as a business, the more you pay. And so when people say large businesses don't pay tax, they actually pay a lot of tax, and they do a lot of things to try and minimise that, but they have to pay payroll tax. So when you actually look at the people that are employed in businesses, it's not simply, I'm going to employ this person and that's their wage and that's what I pay. I'm going to pay their superannuation. I'm going to pay for, different insurances and compensation, different things that have to be covered. There's payroll tax if I'm a larger business, and you don't have to be a huge business. So it's 100 people, I believe, that you start paying payroll tax. And you look at how that actually puts a strain on a business, and it's for what? It's for a tax for being successful, really. That's what it feels like. And Australia, they have, there's been a lot of discussion with the Labor government not wanting to bring in, but I think they are. I think that was the last thing. The tax bracket, they were going to have a bit of relief there, but people are like, no, those rich people, they should pay everything, and you just sit there and go, why? The more you work, the harder you work, the more you're actually contributing to our economy. Why should you have to pay more and more tax because of that? The more you earn in a business, you're totally elevated, and then you've got people that don't pay any tax. And so I think there's just such an imbalance to wanting to get ahead. And a lot of people nowadays, they would rather be looked after by government by getting family tax benefits and, I don't know, different tax things that you get back. I'm never eligible for any of them, so I don't really know what they are. But I think it's difficult when you are trying to build a business, you're trying to create something that you really believe in, and then you feel like for every step that you go forward, you go back to by trying to, I've got to do the regulations, I've got to pay the tax, I've got to, and you're paying tax to, this person and that person and someone else, and you feel like you're just forever paying tax rather than as a business owner. And I'm talking about my personal experience as well. So, I think that's really difficult. And I think I think that businesses should be encouraged to grow. They should be encouraged to, the more people they employ in Australia, small business businesses are the biggest employer in Australia, but we're also under the most strain. So if you actually think about the COVID lockdowns and things, the bigger organisations were able to be open, but the smaller ones had to close in the most part. And you just think, well, most business owners can't afford to be closed for a day or a week or a month, or, you know, and some were closed for many months. And you look at, we had a food manufacturing business, and in that period, the food manufacturing, they supplied a lot of the supermarkets and, you know, sort of bigger, you know, like Qantas and different places. And then something would happen. They'd be told, yes, we're going to get these orders. Go and get all your food. Get ready for it. You're going to manufacture. We want it by this date. And then there'd be a lockdown. They go, oh, actually, we want to cancel that. But this company had actually purchased all of the supplies. They had got their packaging. They'd, you know, produced this food. And then they're just like, no, sorry, we don't want that. And despite the fact that they had contracts and things, they just said, well, too bad, we don't want it. Or we only want a portion of it rather than all of it. And most businesses cannot sustain themselves through impacts like that. So when you tell me that the government should be telling me what to do, and as a business owner, I just think, no, that for those type of things, that should not be allowed to happen. You know, there should be a free and open economy as much as possible in a democracy. And like I said, if you want to live in a socialist place, go somewhere else.
Right. What's next?
Okay. So we definitely have to do the low taxes. There's just so many of them really that we could do. But by like I said, they've done a lot of modelling around their reducing, having a higher tax threshold, can't say it, by increasing that, you're actually taking away. So you look at the way that the system works at the moment. For people that earn up to, I think it's about 20,000 or so, 15,000 something, they start getting a small amount of tax. So before that, they get no tax. And then they start getting a little bit of tax when they go over that. And you've got different levels. So each time you get to a certain level of income, your tax bracket then goes up until it gets up to, you know, the highest tax level. So by removing, by increasing the tax-free threshold to 40,000, and then to just flatten that tax to 20%, sorry. You're only ever paying tax when you earn up to 40,000. So that would actually, you know, include those people that are on, you know, so university graduates and people that are sort of just coming out. They, you know, people on incomes that are lower than 40,000, they would not have to pay anything at all. It would actually reduce a lot of that people that were currently on the lower tax thresholds. They would actually get subsidies and they would get money from the government. So you get your different levels. So you wouldn't need to get that, and then you would get up to 40,000. Then you would only have 20% tax after that, and that would actually, by reducing a lot of our business, you know, inefficiencies and taking away a lot of the unnecessary things that are, you know, getting rid of a lot of the unnecessary people in the government, you would actually then have a smaller government. It would be more nimble. It would actually concentrate on the things like you were saying before. You know, let's make sure our health system is good. Let's make sure that, you know, we're educating our people properly. Let's make sure our roads are, oh, we don't do that, but, you know, make sure that our, you know, country is, or our state is in a position to actually do the things that people cannot do. So, you know, they can't run the hospitals, and I suppose they could if they were private, but that's what government should be restricted to. They shouldn't have to, you know, do all these other things that they have put themselves into. So running your, you know, making sure that we've got electricity and things like that. Like, that's not their, they shouldn't have to do that. It should be open the economy, let people work in their area of expertise, get government out of those areas, and let the market decide what is the best energy, what is the best education, what is, the best everything. If people are forced to buy things because the government makes them, then that is not a free society. And me as a libertarian and a Liberal Democrat does not believe that any of that, a lot of the things that government put themselves in the middle of, they just shouldn't. So at the moment we, have a government running the NBN, and it's so inefficient. It's so expensive. And if they had have allowed, people that were experts in that area to do it, we would have had a much better system, and we probably would have had it sooner, and it would have been cheaper. But we've got a government running it instead. And through the 70s, 80s and 90s, a lot of the state governments actually got out of, running your energy, running your gas, running your water, doing all these different things. There is criticisms about those in different states. We in WA, still have the government running Synergy, but you just think, well, they've also shut out a lot of the competition, not allowing competition to come into WA at all for many years. And so you go to Victoria and you've got the choice of, I don't know how many operators, and you as the consumer decide where you're going to spend your money, and you get whatever you get for your money. In WA, we'll get Synergy. That's all we've got. I think Alinta is starting to get into it, but it's very slow, and it's taken a long, long time to get there. And I think you were asking before about different imposts that are put on small business. One of them, until recently, in WA, and I'm not from here. When I first came here, I went to the supermarket and was trying to buy potatoes, and I thought, what are these potatoes? I don't know what sort of potatoes these are. And I thought, just have to try them. And then there wasn't a lot of range either. And then as I sort of got to know the state, I suppose, living here, realised that there is a restriction on how many potatoes people are allowed to grow. The government controlled it. They told them what potatoes to grow. So that, people were not allowed to just have any potato like they would in every other state. I believe every other state was allowed to just choose what they, farmers were allowed to grow what they wanted. In WA, they were very, very restrictive around it. There was a bit of a tussle that went on with the spud shed for a while, and he just was giving away spuds because he just said, this is ridiculous. You were not allowed to have certain quantities of anything. And so he was just like, right, I won't sell them, I'll give them away. And so they ended up abolishing that. But when you think about government, do you think that they should be telling us what potatoes to eat? Or, I just think that's ridiculous. And they, like I said, they get involved in so many things that they just really shouldn't. That me as Premier, that's what I would look at. What are the things that we should not be involved in, and what are the things that are not beneficial to running a business? They don't add anything to a business. Just get rid of them. So,
right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
On those taxation things that you were telling about, that you'll remove that progressive taxation into a standard flat rate taxation, that what I've read through in different things is that progressive taxation makes the people who earn more pay more taxes, and those taxes then go on to build our roads, build our hospitals, pay for the welfare through aged care, all those costs through NDIS, which is going to be $100 billion now. So all that money that we spend on supporting our vulnerable or poor or needy, that segment of population comes from that progressive taxation. So if you remove that progressive taxation, that spending on our welfare spending will have to either reduce or even go fully. So how are you going to manage that cohort of population and their needs?
So at the moment, because we have the progressive increase in tax, people restrict how much they work. They restrict how much they earn. They purposely don't go ahead. So I have heard of lots of different people. They will graduate from university, and they will go elsewhere to work, to a different country, because they don't want to pay back their HECS debt. They will earn up to a certain amount by, say, they've become qualified as a teacher. They will work as a tutor instead, because they want to continue studying. They don't want to earn over the threshold where they have to start paying back the money. People manipulate the system that is put there. So if you have a flat tax, you're paying 20% on whatever you earn. The more you earn, you're still paying more. You are paying more, but it is actually incentivizing you rather than desincentivizing you to work more and to be more successful. So in Australia, people have a go at people that are quite wealthy, and we've got the tall poppy syndrome. And you think, well, why? Why is that so? You go to places like America, and they think it's fantastic when people are successful. Everyone wants to be entrepreneurial. They want to earn more. They want to create bigger businesses so that they can, provide whatever services or products that they've got. But when you have such a system that actually almost punishes you for being more successful, it's not motivating anyone to want to actually earn more, to be bigger, because there are so many. You're actually having the opposite reaction to, or you have people that actually leave. They don't want to earn in Australia, and you actually see it in a lot of the sports stars. They will establish themselves in places where they don't have to pay as much tax. And I think Leighton Hewitt, I think he ended up copping out in the end, but for a long, long time was actually one of the very few that would be in Australia because he earned so much money and he was taxed so much because of it.
My question is that if you take out that progressive taxation,
Yep.
who is going to pay for all that
So the
welfare
more
spending?
So even though you've got a flat tax, so if I'm earning $1 million and you take 20% of that $1 million and you have $45,000, you would still take 20% of that $45,000. So you can see that the amounts still do go up the more you earn. But rather than paying, so if I earn $1 million nowadays, I'd be paying the top tax bracket. So out of my $1 million, I would probably only receive maybe 500 and something thousand. So if I was doing the 20%, then I would actually have $800,000 in my pocket rather than, and so you're still paying more. So you've got your 200,000 that you're paying, which would go into the system. So it would actually incentivize people to work harder, to be more successful, to grow their businesses, rather than, and it would you've got more successful people working and wanting to earn more because they've got more in their pocket as well, so they can actually, that will stimulate the economy itself. You would actually, and then you've got government out of a lot of the things that they shouldn't be in, you would have far more money than you would at the moment.
Right. So you're saying basically that even if we move from progressive taxation to your suggested transaction of 40,000 no tax and then 20% flat rate tax, we'll still end up with the same total tax collection?
You would have more. You would probably have more.
Huh.
And you would probably, because you've actually taken away all the inefficiencies in government, there would be more. There would be more money in the economy. And I think that is what we need.
Is there some calculations or some papers on these things?
I can get them to send you the modelling.
Right.
It has been modelled and looked at. So
that's interesting. Another question on that front is that why even have a 40% threshold of paying tax. Why not treat all Australians as equal and everyone contributes 20% of their earnings to the Australian basket?
Just from day one?
Yeah, from day one, from first dollar.
Yep.
Why not pay everyone pays into there, and then everyone's equal. Everyone can say, I'm paying 20% of my earnings into Australian basket. Why have these two different groups of people?
Yep. I think because of the culture that, of where we have just had tax thresholds, free thresholds, that it's just a thing that they said, well, if they do it from the first dollar, then people just won't vote for us at all. I think that's probably the reason.
Right,
I would have to actually go to John Humphreys and ask him, but I would assume that is probably where they're at. And I think you actually look at people that are on lower incomes, and they're at a lower starting base to begin with. So you want people to be able to have the opportunity to get up and running. You want them to be able to afford to go and get some clothes to work and set up whatever they need to set up. So I suppose that would be why, but I can find out for you if you'd like.
Sure. Thanks. All right, we've covered 2 or 3 points.
Yep.
What the fourth and fifth?
Have to be reliable energy.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose I've got debt and deficit. I've got so many things that I really need to.
There's a lot to do. Premier's hands are full these days, and
Yes.
everywhere Premier's hands are full. So but we are going in the first 100 days, and then we'll go for the later ones.
It's very busy 100 days here. Okay, so out of those, I suppose the runoff of actually rectifying a lot of the small business and some of these other things would actually then run into helping with the debt and deficit. So I suppose it would have to be the reliable, cheap and reliable energy. So taking away a lot of the subsidised energy production at the moment. So the different at the moment, the thing that me personally and the Liberal Democrats really don't like is that the government are cherry picking. They're deciding what will be successful or will not be successful before it's actually proven. And the way that they're doing that is given, so, you can see with the wind farms, they actually subsidise those hugely so that they're able to get up and running and, and put them everywhere. We're seeing the same with, I guess, the Tesla, the electric cars and things. So the network, the infrastructure is not in place at the moment. So the government are going to put that infrastructure in place to make it possible. I still don't believe that it's possible, but make it possible to actually drive these electric cars and be able to charge wherever. By subsidising those things, you're actually not allowing the market to decide whether that is the best choice and whether it's actually the most efficient. Whether, should it actually be hydrogen cars? Should it be, should it be just, retaining what we've actually got and developing the coal-fired not coal, sorry, the fuels and things. So you actually think, well, taking away those subsidies will actually make the companies that are thinking about different technologies go ahead and they will develop with the mindset of, I need to do this in the best and most efficient way. The energy production needs to be high. It needs to be reliable. At the moment, we're using solar. We're relying on solar and wind power, and that neither of those are reliable and they're not consistent all the time. So then they're saying, well, you need batteries. If you need batteries, there is actually not enough, I believe it's lithium, in the world to actually create as many batteries as what they will need to have a sustainable source of power. So someone hasn't thought this through very well. And by governments cherry picking these type of things, they're creating these false economies that, and I think we have seen in the past as well. So the government can turn it on and they can turn it off as fast as, they want to, and it's actually destroyed industries. So people, I'm just trying to think of one. So maybe the pink bats scandal. So there was, people going along, they were putting insulation in people's homes, and this was back a few years ago. And they had, good thriving businesses that they'd built up over time. Then the government decided everyone should have pink bats in their roofs. We're going to subsidise this. So every man and his dog set up a little business, and this is what I do. And then there was unfortunately those deaths that occurred because people weren't trained, they weren't qualified, and then there was these incidents that happened. So then the government went, actually, well, let's not do that. And so that actually then drove out of business these businesses that had built up over many years. And I think, the same sort of things happen all the time, and really shouldn't. I don't believe that the government should be involved in any of this. So that would be my next one. So
what will you do as a premier to implement this, that everyone's available? So you will have what's from the government that you can do?
So I suppose
you will take away all the subsidies to all the any energy industry, or you will get the government totally out of the energy industry?
I think that it would have to be a gradual thing, or else you're actually creating the same problems that I've just described. But I believe that what it should be is assessing what is actually needed for energy. So McGowan was actually talking about the gas reserves that he's negotiated, and we have a certain amount of gas that is reserved
that's
here.
That's been there for the last 10-15 years.
Yep.
The Carpenter government, I think,
who
created
they
that 15% of reserves for WA.
Yep. So you look at things like that and you say, well, we have to make sure that we've got enough of our own before, and I think looking at what we actually have at the moment. So you have to assess what we have, and then start, I guess, bringing in experts, people that are specialised in those areas. The government are not specialists in those areas. They may bring consultants in and everything, but you need to actually have people that run those industries to be involved in those discussions, and then have that. And I don't know if you can do that in 100 days.
Well, you'll start the process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you would actually then get to a point where you go, well, these are the most efficient, these are the cheapest, this is going to drive the prices down. So what you're seeing at the moment is actually driving prices up. And, by using, and then, even McGowan is saying that we're going to have blackouts this summer. And you go, well, why is this happening? What has actually happened that we are not aware of, or maybe we are aware of it? And but how is the impact? Why can we not rely on energy anymore? Why is it not a normal thing to be able to turn your air conditioner on? If you're paying the bills, you should decide how hot or cold you have your house. The government shouldn't be, and in different countries, you actually have countries that are turning off the power at night time, and these are in freezing cold conditions because they want to save power. And is this where we're headed? The way at the moment, because there's not reliable power, and it's not affordable for a lot of people. So you want to protect people from COVID, but you're allowing people to freeze at night time, and you've got or get too hot, because they can't turn their air conditioner on, or they can't afford to actually turn their power on. And I think that is just a terrible thing. And so I think it's a really important thing to get right. And so
let's get an alternative scenario. You have opened up the industry to every private player who wants to come and develop their own energy systems. the government has come out of the energy market, so there's no synergy.
Yep.
So synergy is in
Yep.
private hands. There's no something, and
Yep.
all the people are competing for gas, for coal, whatever industry, nuclear, solar, whatever.
Yep.
What has happened is because of these competitions and because of the inherent striving of the private businesses for profits, the energy prices have just gone up, shoot up, which means that the people, and especially the poorer ones, they can't even afford to again run this air conditioners. So we are at the same position as we started, that
I
they
don't.
can't run the air conditioners earlier because now of the government regulations. In the alternative scenario, they won't be able to run the air conditioners because of the high prices.
Yep. Generally, when you are able to introduce competition, and you can actually look at the banking sector, the more competition there is, the more they have to work. They reduce their profit margins. You look at banks at the moment, you've got your 4 major banks and you've got your smaller players at different stages. There's been less competition. So these different banks were able to have higher interest rates. There was no market pressure for them to actually decrease because they just had the glut of the people, and so there's no real need for them to lower their interest rates to offer better deals. But when the government actually allowed more competition in the space, so we've actually got non-banks, we've got private lenders, we have a lot of different options nowadays, and you've got some outside banks as well from other countries coming in, so you've got lots of different options. So you've actually seen the larger banks have to compete if they want to get the customers, because the customers just leave. And so by providing more choice, you are providing more challenges for the bigger players. So you can't just do whatever you feel like. You have to actually, if you want to keep those customers, you need to look after the customers. And I think at the moment there's not a real need for anyone. The government run things. They don't look after the people so much. You look at if you say, well, the government's going to look after me, look at the energy prices. They are very, very high. And, we are a state that produces, a lot of the energy that goes out to the world. And we have got such high prices, and it's just so unnecessary. So if you had that competition, I don't believe that if you have a lot of competition, that you would actually have higher prices. Usually the reason why you have such high prices, if you look at the market in general, and this is across all products, you have higher prices in niche things where there's only a few. And that's where you generally have higher prices. If you open up the market, so I'm just trying to think of an example. I don't know, maybe food products or something like that. If you like with the potatoes that I was talking about earlier, you had an artificial higher price of potatoes, and you only had a certain amount, so they were always a little bit more expensive here than they were in Victoria or Queensland or wherever. When they actually allowed farmers to just produce whatever potatoes they wanted, the prices actually adjusted. So you would actually pay more for potatoes that are not as plentiful, and then the ones that are more plentiful, you would actually pay much lower price. And that's the way the energy should work.
Okay, another question is that what I've seen and read again is that there's a big uptake of solar panels on rooftop solar panels, which people get benefit free electricity. The biggest uptake is because the government subsidizes that thing, that industry itself, energy industry, and that's why there's a huge uptake. If you take the government out of that whole equation, there's not big uptake, and we'll be still needing much more coal-powered plants and much more gas power plants. And then there's also the equation of environmental effects of those plants. Where do you see these subsidies and these support again from the government? Would you take the government out of that equation?
Yeah, definitely. I just believe that, so it's been purported that, solar is the most clean, the most whatever. You actually look at the production of the panels themselves, and they produce a lot of waste. You look at, and you could go to same with wind energy as well. A lot of the propellers and things, they need replacing every 10 years, and you can't recycle them at all. They also use oil. There's all of these things that, it's supposed to be a clean energy, but the byproducts of these things, and you have to replace your panels every however many years, or they break down, or they don't work efficiently. So you have to look at the source of the power as a whole. You don't go, I'm getting free energy from the sun. Wow, that's fantastic. You have to say, well, I've installed my panels. I am getting my free electricity during the day as long as I use all my things in my house during the day, which most people work out of home. So, you can still manage to do certain things during the day, utilise that energy, unless you have a big battery, which again is an impost on, and we don't have as much lithium as we need to create them. So you actually have to look at the whole industry and say, is it good? Is it free? Is it green? You can't just look at, free sun, fantastic. I'm not impacting the environment, because you are impacting it through all these other things. So this is where I believe if you open up the industry, and just say, what is the best? Is it nuclear? It may not be nuclear. It may be something that we haven't even thought of at the moment. So and that's what I mean. By limiting or by cherry picking who you're actually deciding on is the green one, it holds back that industry, that it holds back the development of the best and the most efficient means of producing energy.
Right. Okay, we have got one more, your fifth point, and then we'll go to the remaining 10 points.
Okay. Freedom from surveillance would have to be, or free speech. Oh, so hard.
They're all important.
Yes, I know. And that's why we've got them as policies. So I suppose the freedom from surveillance, I guess, looking at how information is used, how it's being retained, what is actually needed. Do we need all the cameras that are around? Is it okay? Is it an invasion of our privacy? We need to examine more about, and even using your computer, if you don't have a VPN or, someone hacks you or whatever, everything is open. So I think surveillance is a really big one. And there was, again, I was talking earlier about seeing ex-police people, that they've actually said about in WA itself, there are certain systems and things that were put in place, and they were put in place for, I believe it was for emergency things like bushfires, floods, things like that. So they had a specific system of cameras and notifications where they were able to really have these technologies in the areas that is likely to have bushfires, or they might be a bit more remote, or that they're in areas where, say in the hills, where they have a number of houses and things around, but it is densely populated with trees. So if there's a bushfire, you need to get people out there. You need to be able to act. So there was a system that was being developed. It was being put in place, and then there was a change of government, and so that particular system, which was being paid for, the next government didn't want it. So they then said, well, we're going to wrap this up. You're now not going to be doing this, developing this system. And so they took it over, and then they started looking at, so there was something in Kalgoorlie. They were looking at some of the topless bars in their spare time with these cameras. And it's like, is that what it's supposed to be? It's supposed to be for bushfires and, to protect our citizens and to make sure that people are kept safe. And they're looking at topless people in bars. And so you start questioning, okay, do we need these, systems in the way that they are? Do we have protections around the information that is released? You actually, there are so many things that need to be looked at in the information that's collected and, how it's being used. So I think surveillance is, a really big one.
So are you talking about the government surveillance or surveillance by private companies that do
just in
Facebook
general,
or Twitter or whatever social media? Who are you talking about? The government surveillance?
All of it. And I think have our laws actually kept up with all the technologies that are available now for the ability for people to, get your information? Is there a need for all of the information, like with those things that I was talking about earlier with Medibank and with Optus and the different ones? Is it necessary to have that information there? Is it, everyone has access to all of everyone else's information? Is that okay? If people get your information, what is the repercussions of that? Why do people have your information? I think we need to ask all that. And I think it could be cameras, it could be, listening to people, it could be, I don't know, there's a lot of things at the moment in relation to all the technologies, the social media, everything, TikTok, you name it. So I think that we need to look at it as a whole and say, are the laws that are in place at the moment adequate to actually accommodate what has developed over the years?
Right. So there's 2 points. One is that government surveillance and the other is private surveillance. Mm-hmm. Let's take private surveillance first. So what you mentioned about private surveillance is the social media companies and apps and whatever recording personal data through videos or the information that we ourselves provide them in our applications or whatever. And these are businesses, and businesses are providing you a service in return of that information. That's the agreement. And you being a liberal Democrat, which says power to the people, you are free to choose what you want to choose, whatever you want to give it, whatever you want to get back. So it's it seems to me is a private contract between a person and a company. Say, for example, I put my details on Facebook, and then Facebook that uses that to give me more ads or keep that data to sell it to some other person. I'm giving that data for the benefit or the pleasure of using that Facebook. Same as TikTok. I'm giving my data for able to upload my dance videos or to see someone else's dance videos. What's wrong in that?
You have the choice to do that, but you should be able to choose to do that, and you should be fully informed how your information will be used. And I think by looking at say Facebook or just any of those, you get this long, terms and conditions have changed. Let's have a look at this. It's 12 pages long and, tiny writing. Are you agreeing to it? Well, yeah, I want to talk to my friend in Sydney. So, yeah, I want to send them photos and do this, do that. So people just blindly tick. And I think, is that okay? I don't know. Is it? People they choose to do that. And but I think that there still should be, particularly if they're selling your information, I think there should be more ability, more transparency around how they're doing that and what they're doing.
But thus they're transparent. They gave you all the information in the terms and conditions. It might be in 50 pages, but it's a transparent communication, and
Yep.
someone if doesn't chooses not to read them,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
their
That's their
choice.
choice. It is their
So
choice.
the government doesn't
Yep.
has any role in that. What I think of, or am I wrong somewhere? That government doesn't have its role. Government doesn't, because you don't want
Yep.
more regulations on the businesses. Government cannot come and say,
Yeah.
why are you putting those terms and conditions in 50 pages? Put it down in 5
Yep.
lines.
And that's kind of what they did with the banking industry. So for a long time, the contracts, the terms and conditions were just, ridiculous, and you had to be a lawyer pretty much to read them. And so there came a point where they were actually required to just do something so people could actually just read it and understand it. And I think that the same thing could be done, with those, people do have the choice of whether they go there, but maybe it should be a little bit more transparent and easier to read. So if if they're going to sell it to someone, then maybe you should know, or maybe you should just not use it. So, and again, it is your choice. So I suppose it's just got to be clear.
So are you asking for more government regulations
No,
and interferences
no.
to tell the private
I just
businesses?
think keep it simple. Keep it, so it's not, legal speak.
The private businesses are not going to follow your wishes until unless there's a law somewhere, which means the government uses its brute force to tell the private companies.
So I believe they
have.
have to give terms and conditions. So in the way that they do with banks, maybe just make that term and condition so it is easily read. It is easy to retrieve. It is easy to,
Again, I'm coming back to the same thing. Banking industry is heavily regulated by the government. You want the social media companies and these other apps to be regulated by the government?
But they already are. That's what I'm saying. There is terms and conditions and things that they have to comply by being in Australia.
That's a contractual agreement, but you want more government regulations.
No. I'm just saying, just change it so it's a little bit more transparent.
But that will come through government regulations.
Yeah. But it's already there, I suppose.
Okay.
You could strip it out, and people can then just choose with their feet.
Sure. Okay. Let's come back to the government surveillance.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by government surveillance? Because these what I understand is the cameras on the roads everywhere are for managing the traffic flow, especially on the highways, Michelle Highway and other ones. They are for getting the emergency services to, if there's a crash or something, the emergency services to get to them faster and save lives.
Yep.
To manage the traffic flow so that people get to home safely and all those things. So what's wrong in that?
There's nothing wrong with that, but is that all they use that information for? I don't know. So
why is it surveillance bad? Then I don't see anything bad in that kind of a surveillance.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that again, you don't have a choice. There are cameras everywhere. Are they looking at, what are they looking at? Are they just looking at the roads? Are they just looking at, you picking up a phone, or I don't know. What are they looking at?
Right. There's also a recent development where I think City of Gosnells and City of Stirling, two local governments have come up with proposals of paying their ratepayers, I think $500, so that they install more cameras facing outwards to the public area, and then sharing their camera details and their ownership details with the WA police, so that the police can use those cameras if there's any crime committed or if they need any kind of help. What is that surveillance?
It certainly is, yeah.
Because the camera data still sits with the ratepayers and the people.
Yep.
They have to give it to the police if they are asked for it. But is it surveillance? Is it wrong? What's your views on that?
I don't know. I think that it's a difficult area because you're actually giving up a lot of your freedoms. Your choice to be, we actually had an event last night as an example, and there were, photographs taken, and there was one person that came up and said, look, I would really appreciate if you didn't show my photograph on here, on any of your posts or, don't put it anywhere. And I think that's a choice she had. She knew, she could see that we were taking photographs. If you are walking down the street and, doing whatever you happen to be doing and, just supposing you're a law-abiding citizen, you're just going down the street and, someone's filming you. Do they have the right to film you? How do you know that they're just going to use that responsibly, or are they just going to erase it every day, or are they going to do something with it? I don't know. But do you have the right to actually say, I don't want to be filmed, or I don't know. I think that there needs to be questions around it and what people use that information for. If they're giving it to the police, going back to, those emergency laws that have now been changed over, who's to say that they're saying, we suspect these people of doing something, they get this footage and go, yeah, that proves it, and it may prove it or it may not, or I don't know. What are they using it for? Are they using it for they need to get a vaccine, or they are using their lights at night time, or they're watering their garden at the wrong time? This is where it starts getting really intrusive into people's lives. And I think that there should be choice.
Right. We have covered your 100 days.
Yes. I'm really tired now.
Now you're getting to know how being a premier is very full on.
Yeah.
But I've got some more questions about your remaining 5 points.
Okay.
One thing, the first one would be for the recall election.
The recall, yep.
So you want to recall your elected member in case you're not satisfied.
Yep.
So my experience from India is that India has got about 30 states. There's an election every second month for some state somewhere.
Yep.
And the model code of conduct comes in every time the election is called, which means the government cannot announce any new policies or new projects or whatever, because it might alter people's mind. The same thing would be here. If we put our member of parliaments on a notice, and they are always thinking that, and you know how the politics works, you will put up an election, the other party will try to bring them down. So they won't be able to work. It's always that pull and push and trying to get the member out. In addition, we also have a member of parliaments federally for 3 years and a state for 4 years.
Yep.
India has got 5 years. They stay there for 5 years. So you already have a lesser period for which they are there.
Yep.
And we also, and you have always the opportunity to build up your case to pull them down at the next election. Why do you want to have recall in a short period like 3 years or 4 years?
Yep. It's so looking at what people promise before the election and then what they actually do after they're elected. And I think it's important that there is, there is responsibility if they're going to say that they're going to do something and people elect them because of that. There should be something to say that you have to do that. And if they choose to, oh, no, sorry, actually, we've changed our mind. Now we've got in and we've, kicked the tyres and figure out what's really going on. We don't want to do that anymore. I think that should not be allowed. If they have been elected for particular reasons, then that's what they should have to carry out. The whole point of an election is to choose people based on what they're saying that they're going to do when they're in. If they then choose to get in and choose not to do any of those things, that's not really the will of the people. And I think that's the whole premise behind the recall elections, that people are actually carrying through with what they're promising. They can't just go and just create something totally different.
So I always thought that the bargain, so for example, I stand for an election and I give you 10 promises. These very 10 promises.
Yep.
And I tell you, give me 4 years
Yep.
as a member of parliament, and I'll deliver you this.
Yep.
That's the bargain.
Yep.
And when you give me the vote, you take that bargain
Yep.
as a free choice
Yep.
that I'll give you 4 years
Yep.
and you do this. If you don't do that, fill up your promises in the next 4 years, then I'll kick you out.
Yep.
So now, is it not that going back on that bargain that
But if they're not doing what they've
you have
agreed
to give them 4 years? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You have to give them 4 years. That's the part of the bargain.
But if they're not actually carrying out the things that got them elected in the first place, then that's breaking the bargain in the first place at the beginning. So they're not actually fulfilling the reason why they got in the first place.
Right. Okay. Next one. Debt and deficit we have covered. Voluntary super.
Yep.
So at the moment, government says because we can put in the super money is your money, but if we make you put that money into a savings account somewhere, which you can't touch, you're not going to spend that money in any whatever you feel like. So that money is there for your older age when you might
be.
not have.
Depending on how they invest it. Yeah.
That's a hypothetical. So
Yep.
that the whole proposal is that the money is there for you in your older age when you don't have the earning capacity, and this money will come and help you at that point of time.
Yep.
What's wrong in that?
It's someone else deciding what you do with your money, and you don't have a choice in it. If you want to do that, you should be allowed to do that. If you want to, you should have a choice. If I want to pay off my house, I should be allowed to do that instead of put money into a superannuation fund. If I pay off my house sooner, I'm going to have more money for my retirement anyway. So I may be less reliant on government. I may be, more motivated to actually put money aside or to create my wealth. If I've got a paid off house, I've got less bills, I've got, more money. So I think there should be choice. I think the whole thing behind superannuation is that you don't have a choice at all. And it's an impost. It's another cost that is put, and you don't have a choice. You can choose your funds now. At one point, you weren't even able really to choose your funds. At least you can choose a fund now. There is self-managed funds, which you could do yourself as well. But again, there are so many rules and regulations. You have to get audited every year, which you have to pay for out of the super fund. So that's actually creating more and more costs that are actually coming out of your superannuation. When you've got a superannuation fund, you've got monthly costs that come out. You've got insurances and things that they put on, which you can opt out of. But again, it is not really. You can choose the fund that you've got, but then they choose where they're investing that money. And you have to keep on top of, are they actually investing my money in the right places? You do have choice between how aggressive you want to be with your fund. So you have got a little bit of choice there, but it's still, they decide how you're spending your money. And they're also deciding when they're going to give your money back to you. And they've also put a limit on, I think that was the Liberal government, put the limit on you're only allowed to save up a certain amount of money under this threshold of, the 15%. And then after that, if you've saved up more money, we're going to tax you just a normal rate again. So you're effectively, you are limiting people. And like I was saying before, that it's actually limiting people's wanting to save because they're only allowed to save up to a certain amount, and maybe that's a lot of money. But what's wrong with trying to accumulate even more money, and then if you are able to do that, why shouldn't you reap the benefits of if you've put it somewhere? But there's just so many rules around superannuation and little choice of people. So that's the thing that I don't like.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but if I read it correctly,
Yep.
the other part of that bargain was that as you save more super, you'll have more super when you retire somewhere, and the government will not have to spend on your welfare expenses
Yep.
because you have that kind of money.
Yep. Maybe.
So now, when you make the super voluntary and people spend it on their houses or getting an education or something, they won't have that money, and the government will now have to pitch in with more welfare spending, which will require more taxation from somewhere and something. So isn't that going back on your other promises that
No.
reduce taxations and everything when you make super voluntary?
I think one of the things that the Liberal Democrats stand for is freedom of choice. And taking away people's freedom of choice is, having superannuation that you have to pay into. You cannot choose how you want to spend that money. You can't decide when you're going to get it. The government decides all that. They tell you pretty much, you have to be with a fund somewhere or you have to manage it yourself. And then you've got restrictions around where you can invest it anyway. So there are so many rules around it. I understand what you're saying, but I'm thinking, well, if I have the choice of where I spend my money, how I spend my money, I might be able to own my house sooner. If you're actually looking at a lot of the stats at the moment, people that save up, like I think I said it a little bit earlier, people that put superannuation money away, or they have to, and they've still got a mortgage when they retire. So if that's the case, and you're looking at people that get loans of 30 years, 35 years now, so you get quite a few people that are retiring with a mortgage, then you are actually just paying off that mortgage with your superannuation money anyway. So you're actually, letting the banks profit more for longer. I don't agree with it, and the Liberal Democrats are just, I just believe that people, and the Liberal Democrats believe that people should decide how they want to, and if they choose to spend all their money, is that a bad thing? And I understand what you're saying, that, but I think that, there just needs to be a discussion about, treating adults as adults, that they have to plan for things. Back in the old days when I was young, if you were going to have a baby, you would plan to have a baby. If you wanted to buy a car, if you wanted to buy a house, if you wanted to do travel, if you wanted to do anything, you have to plan around it. Now people are expecting, I'm going to have a baby, give me a handout. I'm going to buy a house, give me a handout. I'm going to do something else, give me a handout. I'm going to start a business, give me a handout. There is just so much reliance on other people taking responsibility for the choices that you're making in your life, and I don't think that's right.
Taking responsibility is hard.
Yeah, and you have to live with the consequences of those choices. And I think that is, should the government have to bail everyone out of their choices?
Isn't that part of being in a community, that the community takes care of the people who are failing or need a hand temporarily? Isn't that what the community is for?
But it should be temporary, shouldn't it? It shouldn't be just, a lifetime of supporting people. There should be an impetus, to encourage people to work, to save, to, do things, and, they reap the rewards of their hard work. At the moment, it's not really feeling like that, and a lot of business owners feel like they're being punished all the time. So,
one of the big ones which is remaining at the moment, I think, too, is decentralized education and free speech. Mm-hmm. What do you want to go for?
I don't know. I've been talking about free speech the whole time, I think, so. Yeah.
Free speech also comes with restrictions, what you can and can't say. Do you think there's a place in any society for absolute free speech, or it always comes with restrictions? And who then imposes those restrictions?
The Liberal Democrats believe that as long as you're not hurting anyone, you should be able to and I know that this is a grey area, but you should be able to have discussions. You should be able to speak about things, about anything really, unless you are going to hurt someone. How why shouldn't you be able to have debates, discussions about anything, really?
Define hurt, because that's the
exactly.
big question these days, that this is hurt, hateful speech, and that's hurtful speech, and that's that. So that's why all these regulations are there. So how would you define hurt and hate?
I don't know. And again, I think that there needs to be discussion around this. I think there is so much... People are so scared to speak nowadays because they might offend someone. Or you've got other sections of the community that are allowed to offend anyone in the name of their own, diversity. And I think we're kind of straying into these strange lands, really, of who is allowed to actually speak out and who is not. If you are, a religious person, it is you actually see in sports at the moment, if people, and I think Falau was, he was pretty much booted out of his job because he wanted to honour his religion, and he was not allowed to do that. But at the same time in sport, you're actually seeing people being forced to do certain things, to wear certain things, and you just go, well, hang on, where's the freedom there? He's not allowed to do this, but they have to. They have to do something. Does that make sense? So there seems to be some rules for some areas and some, just carte blanche for the rest. And it appears at the moment that there's loud minorities that are actually insisting on, everyone to agree on different conditions and different things without any rebuff. You're not allowed to say anything because you might offend them. But it doesn't matter that they offend the majority of people. And I think there's something wrong with that. There's something wrong in a democratic society where you cannot have free discussion about things. That it might be, and I know Facebook is a private enterprise, but people are not allowed to freely share information because someone has decided that it's not right because something's spelt wrong or someone's didn't actually say exactly that, or and I think that's these lines are just getting blurred all the time, and I think people just need to put their big girl knickers on and grow up and just go, come on, we need to have discussion, we need to have debate, we have to bring that back into our society to have a better society, to have better understanding of each other. If you keep restricting conversation, you are just creating these different tribes, these different groups of people, and you're isolating people. And I think the more you isolate people, the worse society that you actually have. So that's why I think free speech is really important.
So what do you think the government is doing to restrict these free speech, and what would you change to make it much more freer?
I don't know. I'd have to look at all of the legislation out there, and I think some of it is, it's not all just legislation. I think some of it is from the courts as well. Mm-hmm. So the laws are created by a couple of different ways. I think that there needs to be, I don't know, like there appears to be in certain segments of professions, there are more conservative, or there are more, there are just different viewpoints, and they seem to just really, they grow and morph into something that they probably weren't intended to in the first place. And I think a lot of the laws, a lot of the judges, magistrates and different people are restricted by public, by what is going to be written about them, that they say these things. And I think there is such a fear nowadays of seeming unreasonable or punishing people or holding people accountable for things. And I think having free speech is if you say something, you should be held accountable for that. But I think, it can't just go one way. It needs to go both ways. And I think that back, years ago, there was an ability to have public debates, to have, to be able to speak about things, that various different groups to learn to understand each other's perspective were able to speak their mind without, you're going to be chucked in jail or thrown out of university because you speak about religion or you speak about, Hitler or something like that. Not that I agree with, some of these things, but I just think just because someone says, I'm I don't know what, a fascist or a greenie or a whatever, it shouldn't mean that you hate them, or there should be an ability to, okay, they're this, why are they like this? Let's have a talk about it. Let's get to know those different people and their point of view. How did they get to those point of views in the first place? And I think that's the brilliant thing about Australia, is that we've had so many people come from so many different places, like yourself. You're from India. It's a different culture than ours, and it goes into making Australia a better place to have, for those people to come and assimilate and to grow together as people, rather than creating these divisions of people. And I think it doesn't make us a better place by dividing people because they come with a different viewpoint. And, I think there's a thing about people, when they're young, they're probably, certain way of thinking, they're developing their thought processes. Each person has their family, their influence, their education, their life experiences are more limited when they're younger, and then as they get older, those views grow, they change. Just because you thought something when you were 15 doesn't mean you're going to think the same thing when you're 30 or 60. And I think that having an open mind and having an open ability to talk about and discuss things is a way that people can grow and they can develop. And so hopefully that answers your question.
Sure.
Yep.
One thing that you mentioned about me being as a migrant, so I had a question and I was thinking of this thing.
Yeah.
Many people come from different parts of the world, all different cultures, all different ways of thinking, and you might take offense on something on which I might not. Mm-hmm. I might take offense on something on which you might not.
Yep.
So there's always this tendency to understand different cultures and then not say things which might offend someone else. Is that restricting, or is that limiting freedom of speech, or is that reasonable?
I think that you're always going to get people that don't agree with each other. They don't have the same beliefs. You actually think about back in history, people that would go to Catholic church, or they would go to an Anglican church or a Methodist church or something else, or they might be Jewish. They would think, and I'm talking like maybe in the 40s, 50s, probably further back, but they would actually think that people in other religions were wrong. They were, what they think is not right. They didn't have, in Australia anyway, they probably discriminated against each other to some extent by those beliefs, but it didn't mean that people were, beating each other up, or they respected each other to some extent. And I think that as time has gone on, people become more and more tolerant of different religions, of different viewpoints, from that, just using religion as an example. And I don't see it as much now, and maybe because, I don't know, maybe less people go to church than they used to, or and again, it's hard to know, because I think a lot of people are very protective about whether they do believe in certain things because they don't want to be judged by those, you know. But I believe that there should be a place to discuss these things. And just because I think something about a religion doesn't mean that that's right, and it doesn't mean it's wrong either. If I say something about it, it should be my, you know, I should be able to say that. Alternatively, they can say something about mine or me. And, you know, people do take offence. People take offence to everything nowadays. But I think, does it change you? Does it, you know, unless there is some real intent to be, you know, harmful to you, I believe that people should be able to have discussions about these things. And like I said, if people from other countries come here, I find it interesting, and I love travel. I love going to different places and finding out about cultures and to learn about why, you know, looking at the history of places. I like the history of my own country as well. Why did people, you know, want to do this back then and now it's totally different? And how did that actually change through the years? And I think, you know, it's changed because there's different people here now. We have a different tolerances. We have different inputs. Sorry, I'm losing my voice, talking so much. But I think that that freedom of speech and the freedom of, you know, our multicultural society is that's the beauty of Australia, that we do have a tolerance to understanding and to learning and to accepting into, and you use food as an example in Australia. You can go to, you know, most streets, you know, places where they sell food, and you will find all sorts of different foods that are not, you know, from Australia itself. They're from other places, but we've taken all of these places in, and you know, you'd be hard pressed to find people that haven't had, you know, Chinese, Indian, you know, all these different things. So I think that is a good thing, and I think that learning from people, I one of the things that I really am upset about, I suppose, as I get older, is the fact that people are not proud to be Australian. It feels like people are made to feel bad about being Australian, and they've got to celebrate other people's cultures, but they can't celebrate their own. And I think Australia Day, very controversial, I know, in some places, but Australia Day is a perfect example of that. We should be able to celebrate the fact that we are a united, you know, we are a multicultural society that accepts people generally, and you know, we have, like, you go all around the world and people love Australians. They love coming to Australia. They, you know, on the most part, they do talk about how laid back we are, how, you know, tolerant we are, and I think you're seeing a bit of a move towards less tolerance, and I don't think that's to the benefit of the country.
While you were saying that, you said a very, very pertinent point that if I'll offend you on some things and you'll offend me on some things, and that's where the thing about freedom and choice is, that if I have the choice and the freedom to offend you, it's a responsibility on me to take offense in a good spirit.
Yeah.
That's where the bargain
And I think you
is.
don't have to listen to it. You can just walk off if you really want to, or you can have that debate. But that's, again, is your choice.
That'll be fun, that I offend you and then walk away.
Yeah, I know. Maybe it might create walls.
That's
No,
okay.
yeah.
One thing which you alluded to very recently is that people are happy and proud to be whatever they want. They're not happy being an Australian. What does being an Australian means? Because that's the question I've been trying to find an answer for the last 8 years.
Yeah.
Being here, what is an Australian? What's being an Australian?
I don't know. And I think it's probably different for everyone. And I think for me, it is appreciating our history, knowing where, you know, we have like, you know, so much history, really. And we have the Aboriginals that were here, that there was, you know, possibly people before them. We've had different people that came, so you've got the French, the Dutch, the different people that came here and just looked and went, nah, we're going, we don't want to be a part of this. And then you had the English who, you know, they must have just picked a different point and came in and decided, no, this is where we're going to be. And how that just changed. It changed everything. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to be Australian, I guess, but for any country to appreciate their history, to accept it, to, you know, for me as, you know, an Australian, I don't believe I should have to apologise for what my ancestors did, and I don't believe I should expect other countries to do that either. I do the best that I can in my time. I always try and look after people. I try and do the right thing. But I think a lot of that, what is Australian, you have to be ashamed if you're not Aboriginal. You have to, you know, feel like you celebrate, you know, Hindu festivals, and you should celebrate all these other things. But then Australia Day, there's every year now. There is a big, you know, let's cancel that. Let's get rid of it. Let's not actually think about our history. Think about, like, we've had Remembrance Day the other day on Friday, and to not reflect on what the people that went to war actually were fighting for, that freedom, you know, the democracy that we do enjoy here. We should reflect on those things. The fact that in those wars there were all sorts of people there. There were Aboriginals. There were, you know, people from England. That was the making of, you know, the Australian identity. You know, that we were. I suppose you could say, if you looked at a lot of the fights that happened they weren't supposed to be won by Australians. We were sent there to, you know, do whatever we were to do and, you know, go home. And they wouldn't. They refused to give up. They would, you know, you talk about Gallipoli, you talk about the different places that they were. And in New Guinea, I was actually watching a thing the other day about, there was a place and the Japanese were there and they were fighting, and there was no way that they could win, but they just said, no, we are not going to be captured. We are not going to give up. And they didn't. And I think the courage, the you know, that I'm not going to give up, you know, that is Australian. You know, we may be relaxed, we may be accepting, we may be all of these other things as well, but we can be bloody stubborn. We can, you know, and I think that's what we really need to grow, to remember and to grow. We need to allow our children and grandchildren to be proud of all of that history. No one in any country can say that horrible things have not happened. You know, at different times there's different thinking. And, you know, you just do the best that you can now. And I think you take what was good in your past and you be proud of that. And I think there are many things that we have done in Australia. We were actually one of the first places to allow women to vote. You know, there were all these different things that have actually happened through the years that are fantastic for Australia. And, you know, I think they should be celebrated.
Right. Okay, that's a good discussion. That gives me some indication of what's being an Australian is, and there's a lot of responsibility now on my shoulders. So
you're a part of it.
It's a part of it.
Yeah.
Let's come back to Liberal Democrat Party.
Mm-hmm.
How has been your outcomes in elections? I think you've been there for 10, 12 years now. So how has been the election outcomes in the last state elections, in the last federal election?
Yep.
How did you fare?
We haven't done the last federal election. We didn't do that well, and I think that may have been the fact that there were so many different smaller parties that were activated because of everything that happened during COVID, and I think a lot of those actually split the vote a lot. because of the way that the preferential voting system works, a lot of those smaller ones, because they didn't join together, they just got knocked out early on, and so that resulted in less success than what we would hope for. The last state election, we did have a sitting member, and then he was actually before that, he was a sitting member, and then when the last state election occurred, he actually was not returned. So I think for the Liberal Democrats in WA, that was actually a real blow to the party here. It actually created a bit of a situation where a lot of the people that supported Aaron Stonehouse left the party, and or they just didn't participate as much. So it's created a little bit of a difficult situation where we're rebuilding. And so me as the president and the executive and the rest of the executive members, we have really taken it upon ourselves to create better processes that will actually stand for forevermore, hopefully. We'll be able to hand that on to the next lot of people, that the next election that we have will actually be more organised. So at the moment, last night I was saying that we had our first release of our WA firearms policy. That's our first policy that we've worked on since we've been in. So our executive got voted in July, so really sort of up and running in August. So we plan on working on different things that are specific to WA and are relevant. So we'll certainly be talking about, and firearms is a big one for us, because we've actually seen what's happened with McGowan and Papalia have actually done, they're going to rewrite the legislation, but they're not really engaging with a lot of the shooter associations, which is a little bit extraordinary in my mind. They've released people's locations, and people have figured out where all the guns in the whole of WA are. And I think the McGowan and Papalia governments have never acknowledged that was wrong, and they've just stayed silent on apologising, and that is terrible, because they're trying to vilify legal gun owners that have gone through all of the processes to be given a licence, and then they're trying to vilify them as if they're criminals, and they're not. And so we'll be, the WA Liberal Democrats will be rolling out our policies, and we'll be doing that. We want to engage with our communities, and I'd be really, really happy if anyone wanted to reach out to me or any of the executives, just to come and meet with the different various groups that are around. We want to understand the different groups that are working. So I'm assuming the migrant groups. Certainly in my election experience, I've met a lot of really entrepreneurial, smart people who they're setting up their businesses. They've moved to Australia for a reason, and they're trying to make the most of their opportunity in Australia. And we do have a great place here, and it allows people to grow their businesses, to do all these things, but we just need a little bit less intervention to do that. but like I said, the Liberal Democrats in WA are really focused on 2025. We want to grow our involvement in all communities, not just one or two. We want to understand what people want. We want to hear people's stories. We want to people to understand our story as well, and to understand what we're about, and hopefully understand our policies so that they will support us in the next election, so that we can get some seats.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
One thing which I was thinking is that, do you get people confused between what is Liberals and Liberal Party and
Yep.
what is Liberal and Democrats Party?
Yep.
And do you get a lot of questions on that, and how
Yes.
would you differentiate between those two parties, because similar
Yeah.
names,
Yeah.
and you get confused.
Yep.
And
Well, we are changing the name, so
probably similar policies.
no, not at
Okay,
all.
Okay,
No.
so how would you differentiate? Okay, I come and
Yep.
ask you, what's
Yep.
the differentiation of these two parties?
Yep.
So I can make up my mind.
Yep. I can't really speak for the Liberals at the moment. I look at what they are doing federally and state, and I actually don't see a great deal of difference between them and Labor and the policies. So there are some differences, obviously, but they have chosen to go down, the big government area, the way. That is totally different than what we believe. So they actually purport to be small government, but what you actually see federally and state when they were in did not actually reflect that. So the Liberal Democrats, we've actually got sitting members in Victoria state government. So they're contesting at the moment, but they've been really vocal about the things that are important to the community, to things that have actually, the government overstep in certain areas. They are willing to stand up against the majority, sort of, what the government is saying the majority of people believe, or what they are trying to push. And they're willing to actually stand up and say, no, that's not okay. It's actually taking our freedoms. It's, they're willing to stand up. And I think that the Liberal Democrats themselves really stand up for what the people believe. We have strong values about, like I said, small government, less intervention, more choice. We want lower taxes. They're the premise of our party, and that's what I see in the people that at the moment are members, and that's what I hope for when we get elected.
Right. The last question before we close.
Yes.
Do you have any preferences, or do you go for preference deals with the different parties, and what other parties have you done that in the last few elections?
Yeah, the last election, there was a deal done with the United Party. That was actually Australia-wide. So I coming into the Liberal Democrats, believe that you still can choose who they do have preference things at different stages. And the last election, because it was such a contentious election and there were so many freedom parties, that is what they actually said, well, we would prefer if you voted for these particular parties up the top, and then put the majors down the bottom. So that was to try and get seats for the minor parties. It kind of, like I said before, it didn't really work. But I think generally it's we don't have particular. It is up to the individuals to decide how they want a preference. So yeah,
Right, fair enough. Okay, how does anyone finds you? Where can I contact you, find you, join any of your events if you have them? Are they open to public?
yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so
Yep. So if you go to if you just Google search the Liberal Democrats Western Australia, you'll find us. We have our page there. You'll actually find information for our branches. Anyone is welcome to any of the branch meetings, so please come along. It would be fantastic, and we just love new people and new discussion. We're a pretty friendly bunch, so it's always good. And we also have regular events. So as we're getting towards Christmas, we probably have a little bit of a break, but generally we have been having either a pub catch up, so it's just a casual, more a social thing. And we'll just, various people will meet. We like to have those in different locations so that actually accommodates different people. And we also have larger events. So like we did last night, releasing things like the firearms policy, or we might be having the previous larger function that we had was having Battleground Melbourne, so we actually had a screening of that. We like to mix it up. We certainly like input from people on what issues they would like to discuss. Obviously, in the branches, we do like to talk about what policies people would like to discuss and have a bit of a discussion about that. And then, it is social as well afterwards. So, certainly go onto our website. So it's the Liberal Democrats WA. And you can actually go on our Facebook page as well, so Liberal Democrats WA, and you will find us on there. And please feel free. Also, I just have to talk about, just briefly, our re-registration. So the McGowan government has changed the requirement for every political party in WA to be registered. So previously it was 50 members. That was all you had to have and to prove that you were a political party. Then they changed it to 500. And then, so the requirement is now you have a minimum of 500 members, and each, you also have to have 500 declarations from members that are signed and all the details, and that is all given on the 24th of November to the Western Australian Electoral Commission. We have to do it in a particular way, but we need those 500 declarations. So if anyone is out there wanting to help us out, if you've heard anything that you like, certainly come along to our branch meetings or contact me directly, anyone in our party, have a chat. But we would welcome you as a member. So you can have a free membership. Just go on our website. Again, if you go to Liberal Democrats WA, go to re-registration and you fill out the details, and then you have to print off the declaration, fill it out, send it back. And we need 500 of those. So we probably need about 300 more at the moment, so we're desperately trying to get them. So please, if anyone, like I said, if you like the sound of what we're about and you want less government, more freedom, certainly, feel free to be a member and to come along to some of our events.
Wonderful. Thanks. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. There's a lot to take in.
Yes.
There's a lot to think over. And I hope there's many people will find this chat interesting and they'll know some more things about Liberal Democrats outside of the bigger parties. I think that should give them more inputs to take in when they make a decision which party to choose. So, thank you for finding the time.
Yep. And thank you so much, Namal, for giving me this opportunity to speak. And thank you, everyone, for listening too.
Wonderful. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Do like, subscribe, and share on whichever platform you have heard this. To know more about Perth Dialogues, please visit perthdialogues.au. From everyone in the studio, goodbye.